This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. Over the past 5 to 10 years, Dover has seen a lot of positive development, positive growth, modernization, and just overall good, thoughtful planning being implemented by our development community. We're going to continue that trend, I think, for the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the keystone projects of that is a new project that is coming off of Littleworth Road. The Sky Hill is the current name of the residential side. It has been referred to as Terra Nova and Westfield in the past. I'm being joined today by Chad Kageleiry from Summit Land Development, who is the principal behind this project. Chad, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
So in my mind, this is probably the biggest project cumulatively that Dover has seen and probably will see. We're talking 600,000 to 800,000 square feet of commercial. We're talking 600 to 800 residential units. I know there's a lot to be still figured out, but conceptually, I mean, that's a lot of development in that 200 roughly acres.
Yeah, those concept numbers are accurate. That's what we're shooting for. Our rough designs show that. I think that was the formula that was the basis for the development agreement, the public-private partnership agreement that we have in place right now, where the city was encouraging, let's have a lot of commercial growth.
Right.
And also, we need some housing, so let's find a way to encourage a lot of housing. And that particular location, it's on a state road. It was vacant farmland. It's only a mile from the turnpike. The industrial project is surrounded by industrial parks, and the residential project is surrounded by residences. So it made a lot of sense to do them individually where they're going. And it checks a lot of boxes for what makes an ideal development site. You've got access, you've got utilities, you've got zoning, you've got proximity to good highway systems.
And you got a market growth area. There's really no commercial, and the residential that's in that area is pretty much single family detached. There's not a lot of density, not a lot of opportunity in the existing for a higher density usage. So you're bringing that to the area too.
It's very similar to, I keep referring to Sky Hill as the second coming of Pointe Place.
Yeah. It's Pointe Place with experience.
Yeah, it's a bit bigger. I've learned a lot in the last 8 or 9 years since developing that project. So there are some things that we can improve upon. But Dover Point Road, for the most part, was single-family homes. Now, there were some auto dealerships, but not a whole lot of other commercial, certainly no density in multifamily. And not that there's anything wrong with downtown, because I own properties downtown. I'd like to develop property downtown, but I'm using this theme of kind of a suburban multifamily theme where people don't have to be right downtown. They've got a bit more green space around them. Traffic and routing is a little bit easier. And in each of those locations, the commercial component, the boutique commercial, I'll call it, in the mixed-use buildings are bringing an element of convenience to parts of town that really didn't have it before.
Yeah, it's giving a way to not have to go downtown or through the more congested areas to get services and goods. You mentioned the public-private partnership. That's something that's been in the works for about 4 years now. It was 2022 when we negotiated and the council signed off on support for that. And you're right. It was a great opportunity for the city to say, we're going to continue this relationship that you and the city have had successfully on Pointe Place, on Stonewall, on a couple other projects to say, we know what we're doing now. Let's keep going.
Right.
And I think it's a good example of some things take time. 4 years. It seems like it could have had further along, but I can only imagine from your standpoint the complexity of the design engineering that has to go into this type of project.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that, because some people say, developing property, it's easy.
Yeah.
You buy a piece of land and you get some permits and you start building. And maybe if you buy an acre, that's the way it works. But when you're talking a couple of 100 acres with, a variety of product, different sizes and types of industrial, multiple different types of housing, road systems, interconnection plans, layers and layers of permits at the local and state levels, it gets complicated and it's time consuming. It's expensive. But, I think the product is good, and at the end, it'll be a really good result.
It's funny because I hear the same thing. I don't understand why it takes this long. And I'm like, well, you either want to do it or you want to do it right. I suppose you could just throw something together and try to bring it up the planning board flagpole, and they'd probably nix it, and then you'd have to start over. Instead, you've taken the thought of, as you said, the model of Pointe Place. How do we improve upon that? But also, how do we connect that commercial industrial piece across the street and develop that business park at the same time?
Again, you've mentioned two of the previous developments that I've done that we've worked on in partnership, Pointe Place and Stonewall Drive Industrial Park. And both of those met with obvious and early success. So while those were still being built, I go, this is a model that works. Where can I find it again? So part of the time lag in getting this stuff to the planning board has been self-survival, all right? To try to find a way. You can't do it all at once, but while Pointe Place is being built out, okay, I already know what I want to do over here, and I start taking some of those initial steps. I really wouldn't have wanted to have still 200 units to build down there, and then at the same time have another 700 to build on the west side of town. I've got to manage a lot of things, time, capital, resources. So that's part of the reason for the timing. It seems to have worked out pretty well. We just finished the last phase of Pointe Place, and we're 100% occupied right now, and those tenants moved in April. So ideally, I can start building the road system at Sky Hill this fall, and we're kind of on schedule to do that. On the industrial side, we built a road system a year and a half ago, have not landed another tenant since we got Bluebird Storage, but we're in a lot of discussions with some large industrial manufacturing users right now that would love to bring that to the table.
What is easier for you, holding out and waiting for one large tenant or trying to do a couple different tenants where you might get some faster cash flow?
I think the best return on that land is to have fewer larger tenants. There are other sites available in the Seacoast that could hold 12,000 square feet or 25,000 square feet. But in a way, it would be a poor allocation or use of, a site that can hold a 500,000 square foot building. Yeah, there are very few of those around. And then you couldn't divide that same land area into 10, 50,000 square foot buildings. Yep. There'd be too many driveways, too many loading dock systems, too many entrance points. So there's much better density in waiting for the scale and the right fit for that piece of land. And that's one portion of it, that very large user, very, very flat. As you get closer to Littleworth Road, there's more topography, which lends itself better to more and smaller buildings because they can be sited differently. So quite a bit of thought and design preparation went into laying out that concept the way that we did. So
you have a concept, and for the listener, it starts at Littleworth and goes, I guess it would be northeasterly into the site. And it's similar to Pointe Place. You have more high density closer to Littleworth. And then as you get into the site, it's going to be more single family residential, which melds with what's existing there along Lucy and Wallace towards the backside. When we've talked about this, my sense is that what you're looking to do is get a lot of the site work underway under phase one, regardless of when you're going to build the homes or sell the lots to have homes built. But the idea is, to the extent possible, minimize the later year site work by doing as much up front. Is that fair?
Well, we want to get the road work in place for, let's say, 3/4 of the road system. Number one, and that road system, the phase one of the road, would include most of the single family stuff built towards the back of the property. They can't get to the back of the property without the front half of the property being built. So that road has to happen. And there'll be some mixed use and residential buildings, multi-tenant buildings proposed on that entrance leg so that people know as they're driving in, I'm getting into the village now. And then as I move back into the property, I'm getting to where the single family homes will be. The function of those homes by themselves back there isn't vastly different than right up the street on Emerald or Ezra or Indian Ridge or some of those where you turn off of the main road and you go in a little ways and then, there are single family homes out there. In this case, it would be great to get some traction with home sales, which there's activity then. People are going down there looking at it. They understand how the whole neighborhood will be laid out. And then on the way in, like at Pointe Place, there will be some village-themed buildings. That, oh, terrific. There's going to be, be a coffee shop here, and maybe a small restaurant. There could be some other conveniences that is part of this new neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
as you are laying out these concepts, you are multifaceted as a developer, but you tend to focus on commercial, industrial, or mixed-use multifamily.
More recently, yes.
So when you're looking at it and saying, here is a project that has all of these different styles in it, do you then look for a partner to take the single family, or do you hold on to those and then decide whether you're going to build them or not yourself?
Yeah, the single family, that's not really what I do.
Yeah.
I've got associates and former customers where I've sold permitted sites to them. I like the end product. So it's a component to the entire development. So I go back to some of these guys and said, I'm going to have some, 55 and older community. That's a big piece of the single family. Would you be interested? Right off the bat? Yes. And so we pretty much have our agreement in place. Ditto for the open market housing. I went to the first guy who's a friend of mine, and we've done business before. I said, is this something that you would be interested in? On the spot. And I think knowing what the end result is going to be gives them some confidence that this is going to be a good market for us to be selling our homes in. Another guy is talking about the townhomes. There's a variety of houses. The assisted living, that's likely to happen. Is it guaranteed to happen? No, it's a placeholder for that. But I think it'll be a terrific location for that, again, as it was on the south end of Dover. And if somebody wants to come in and buy that portion of the property and add that component to it, that would be great.
So in a way, you're going back to tried and trusted partners and saying, here's my vision. If you want to be part of that vision, here's the opportunity. And through that vetting, you maintain your overall spirit and intent for the overall project.
I have design review rights.
Gotcha.
But there are like 5 guys right now that are pretty much on board.
Great.
To pick up the pieces that I'm thinking about selling off. Yeah. And then, as I've done before, now I'm going to focus on the long-term hold for building multifamily housing, mixed-use buildings, some commercial buildings. There'll be a couple of buildings that front on Route 9.
Yep.
So I'm excited about this.
And then as you're moving through the process, as you mentioned, there's a lot of components, a lot of moving parts. One of them has to be the traffic analysis. It's a state road, Route 9 Littleworth is. So you have to go through a process that you didn't have to go through with Pointe Place, where the state has a high level of review for that. I'm not going to ask you how that's been because I can imagine.
It's go ahead and ask me. I'll tell you. It's a pain. All right.
I sat with you in a meeting recently and in the state, and I'm thinking to myself, we pride ourselves on saying you'll get through our process in 65 to 90 days, depending on your engineer's capacity. And to sit there and hear, 260 days?
No, those 260 working
days, right.
Which basically puts you at 1 year out.
Yeah.
You're trying to maintain, a permitting and construction schedule.
Yeah. And
the final permit, the state government might be saying, well, if all goes well, you should have this in a year or so.
Yeah.
So you're going to try to ways to work with that, mitigate that, find out where their real holdups are, find a way to get through that to speed things up.
So another component that we recently did was your abutter meeting. The development agreement calls for 2 abutter meetings, one before planning board review and one before starting construction.
By the way, those have a new name,
AKA
public stonings.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually thought it wasn't that bad.
You weren't getting ripped. I was the one.
I was at the end. I think it served the purpose of giving people a little bit more informal way to say things. I appreciated the guy that was hard on you in the beginning and then said, when are the units going for sale so I can move into one?
Right.
That's always which stone are you throwing?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that overall, I hope it helps, and I know from the other projects we've done with it, it helps the actual planning board process because those folks get to feel like they've been heard. early on.
Yeah, they've been heard, and it's actually a helpful process. What that most recent neighbor abutter meeting did for me was peeled back. All right, what are the fake issues?
Yep.
And what are the real issues? The fake issues were the guys that moved into a neighborhood to cut down all the trees in order to get it built and said, we don't want you to cut down any trees. Now, we know that,
Right.
that's not going to go anywhere, and they might bark a little bit, but at the end of the day, realize that if there's going to be development, a certain number of trees have to be cut.
Right.
So that one didn't surprise me at all. What did surprise me was the concern for traffic. Yeah. And we've done a lot with our interior routing, with multiple means of egress, with multiple meetings with DOT and the city to try to address some issues, a phasing plan, how much development will there be in 2 years and 4 years and 6 years and up to 8 years. But the point that was lost in that, and I had to be careful about bringing it out, is every one of these guys were complaining about the traffic that they waited in.
Right.
Without realizing they're part of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
when
I don't want anyone else to come here to mess up the traffic, but the fact that I'm here and my neighbors are here, well, the traffic's already messed up because of us. So you got to take that with a little grain of salt and say, let's find a way through this together.
Yeah. I also like there's a problem that we, as in the drivers, have helped create. You should solve that problem.
Right.
And then the problem really is the state's problem in a lot of ways.
On Route 9 it
On
is.
Route 9, certainly.
And Exit 8 on the turnpike.
Exit 8. And the Exit 8 problem, as we've discussed on this podcast and you and I have discussed, is not a problem that's going to be a snap of the finger and a fix. The state isn't going to say overnight, you know what? We're going to revise Exit 8 to be this type of intersection instead of the way it is.
And even though this is a big project, it's really not adding a whole lot of traffic, percentage-wise, to what's in that area anyways. Right. So there's no way to connect what's going on out there to the existing problem or the problem that will still exist after this is built. It's a very, very small percentage.
So you're looking for phase one to be through the planning board process and your entitlement by Labor Day. Is that safe?
Yeah, if I can get through the state. I mean, as soon as we get through technical review with Dover, so we know that the phase one of our plan has been 95% engineered and designed, I'll start with a pre-development meeting at the state so that to get on their wait list, if you will,
their queue,
that much sooner. And then I would think that given the engineering advance that the city has, we should be able to get through the planning board within, 2, probably 3 meetings at the most, which might put us into July somewhere. And then if the state takes another month to a month and a half. So yeah, Labor Day to have permits in place to give us 2 months of decent construction weather.
Yep.
That's a big advantage that helps things really come together next summer.
So let's say that we'll say September to September is your construction period, building the roads, et cetera. You could start seeing foundations for some of those homes in October and beyond. You can see occupancy in early 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual once a road is kind of roughed in. I mean, I bought the site, it was already cleared of trees.
Yep.
Right? So it's pretty wide open in that regard. I think once utilities are in the ground and the road base is kind of there, by base, not meaning gravels not meaning pavement, there are certain home builders that would say, yeah, I want to get started. I want to have something, to show early on. So I bet there are foundations in the ground out there in 15 months.
Pointe Place was about a 15-year build out.
I think it wasn't quite that much. The first residential homes that Changing Places built, I think that went online in,
I thought 9 or 10.
Yeah, probably 10 or 11. So if that's the starting point, and then we finished all of our construction in 25, then it was 15 years, and that was about 450 units.
So your best bet is maybe a 10-year build out, but more likely it's probably another 15-year build out on Sky Hill.
I hope not. I don't know if I have 15 years left in me. So, and I'd like to see it to completion. I've wisened up a little bit about how to scale things and sequence things. I think a slightly larger portion of this project is single family. So that might move a little quicker.
Yep.
But a 10-year build out is not unreasonable. But I think 15 is a lot of latitude.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it get going and continue through the entitlement process and for the groundbreaking next year.
You and me both. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
On Monday, the day before this episode aired, a Memorial Day ceremony was held at Pine Hill Cemetery. This year's ceremony was organized by the Woodman Museum. A Memorial Day ceremony has been a tradition in Dover every year for well over 100 years, organized by various veterans and civic groups. This week, in 1923, Dover held what was described as an impressive and solemn Memorial Day recognition. At that time, Memorial Day had been observed for 55 years, and in 1923, the ceremonies took on new significance as the community paid tribute to the memory of those who had died during World War I, which had just ended a few years before. It was pointed out that one of the reasons Dover's ceremony was a solemn affair in 1923 was a decision to postpone sporting events until after Memorial Day exercises were complete. May 29, 1923, was also noted for perfect weather. The city's monuments had been draped or decorated with American flags, wreaths, and bunting. That year's ceremonies and events began with the placement of markers throughout the city's cemeteries, a task completed by local veterans organizations. According to Commander Stackpole of the Sawyer Post of the Grand Army, 652 markers were placed in Dover, 8 more than the previous year. Later in the day, a large parade stepped off and wound its way through downtown Dover. 18 Civil War veterans marched in the parade that year, 4 fewer than the previous year. As the parade continued through the city, hundreds followed as the parade, which included 15 automobiles, stopped at some of the city's cemeteries for Memorial Day tributes, including somber numbers by an accompanying band. When the procession arrived at Pine Hill Cemetery, all were seated near the Grand Army of the Republic Monument for the day's final tribute. There, those assembled heard from Mayor Charles Waldron, heard the recitation of the Gettysburg Address, and, finally, from the day's keynote speaker, Dr. Lewis Flanders. Flanders spoke for, quote, only 10 minutes, but his words were said to be the most eloquent of the day. Here's part of his address. We are met here today in visible acknowledgement of the debt we owe to those men who fought so many years ago to preserve the Union. The fighting years have sped, and now, of all the men who participated in that great struggle, the roll of the dead far outnumbers the roll of the living. To die is to most men a calamity. To be forgotten is one of the saddest reflections we are all called upon to entertain in the presence of death. In an endeavor to escape oblivion, we set these stones upon our graves, and loving friends sometimes cut upon them that which, in the eyes of God, must seem but a pitiful record, the scanty catalogue of our virtues. How much better than the testimony of cold marble are services like those we are engaged in today. When you men of the Grand Army have gone to your long rest, you may safely leave Memorial Day with its customs and traditions in the hands of the veterans of the Spanish War and with the men of the World War. It will be theirs to teach to the coming generations the throes of self-sacrifice and devotion. Those words, spoken in 1923, remain true today as we remember the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.